still with it, posting up on Brown, splits two defenders, finds Robinson, shot blocked by Rudy. Robinson able to save it, shot clock to 10. Brown's in the corner in front of the Wolves bench, the three ball, no. Rebound, Rudy boxing out Mitchell Robinson like an absolute champ, and now a foul is called on the Knicks. The frustration starting to build. Crowd's getting into it.
Voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Alan Horton. You heard him on the call the other night as the Minnesota Timberwolves handle the New York Knicks and are now remaining undefeated at Target Center, 117-110 the other night. Philadelphia on the horizon this evening at Target Center, a 7 p.m.-ish tip-off. And joining us now at Wolves Radio via Twitter is Alan Horton. How you doing this morning, Alan?
Eric, I am great, man. How are you?
I am fantastic. Ready for the holiday. Hope that you get an opportunity, despite right in the thick of things with Embiid and company in town tonight, that you get a time to take a breather throughout this next several-day stretch here. And looking forward to this game tonight, but I want to kind of go backwards a bit before we go forwards, Alan. And I saw you tweet this out yesterday. Chris Finch, you know, and as maligned, or just with a franchise that has had maybe in a lot of cases more downs than ups. You don't really keep track of certain things like this. And Chris Finch certainly has faced many questions over the course of his tenure here in terms of how things are operating, getting the most out of various situations. But you look at the wins and losses, and that's one stat that will never lie. And in the end, it sounds like he is now the winningest coach in Wolves history. Stable and competitive, kind of the term to use when you look at how Chris Finch has done things here.
Yeah, when you win 9 out of 10 games, that'll rack up some wins in a hurry. And he moved past Flip Saunders in win percentage. Obviously, has a long way to go to catch Flip in the win column, the all-time wins. But it's certainly a sign of, I think, what a solid coach Chris Finch has been. I think I've been a big fan ever since he got here. He just seems to have. I've seen a lot of coaches come through. So I started in 2007, and Randy Whitman was the coach, and then you had Kevin McHale, and then you had Kurt Rambis, and then you had Flip, and then you had Sam, and then you had, I'm probably going to miss somebody in here, Rick Adelman was in there, and then Tom Thibodeau, and then Ryan, and then Chris, I think, are the guys since in my 17 years. And I just think Chris has a really good balance of a lot of those coaches. He knows his X's and O's. But I think when you're a head coach and you're basically running your own small organization, right? You're the head of this. You've got your assistant coaches, you've got the players. I just think he manages people really well. And he manages relationships. He's got a good rapport with the players, yet he will be in a drop of a hat. If you watch a practice, he's not afraid to call somebody out if you're not bringing it or you're not paying attention to the small details. He'll call out the biggest players in Ant and Cat and Rudy, as well as some of the guys who aren't even playing. He wants those guys sharp as well. So he's got that rapport. He's got that tough love. He's got just the whole package. And I think he's got a really good balance. I think you can hear it when fans, he always encourages fans, if they ever see him on the street, stop and say hello. He'll talk some basketball with you. He's a regular guy, and you'll find him out wandering around the streets in Minneapolis, just like the rest of us. He's been really refreshing. I think it's exactly what this organization needed, and I think we're starting to see kind of the fruits of that over the beginning part of this season.
It's been awesome, and Chris really has been awesome to this radio show, a weekly guest with Pay the last couple of years. And I'll kind of transition to what we kicked things off with Chris Finch yesterday when he joined 9 to noon. Is this Rudy Gobert thing is really working, Alan, and trade equity and all of that aside, and just kind of working his way into the mix a year ago. And we were doing kind of a Takesgiving bit yesterday. And with what I've watched through 13 games, you can tell me I'm preposterous if so, but that's fine. If Rudy Gobert stays healthy and he continues to do what he's doing, he's a legitimate defensive player of the year candidate, a guy that's won 3 of them before. But the way the start he's off to, so impressive, getting chance at Target Center. It's a beautiful thing for the Frenchman.
It is, and I heard the take, Eric, and I loved it. I was like, yes, all right, now my day can go on. Like, I like this idea. I don't know if he ends up winning it or not, but, this was the hope when you acquired Rudy Gobert, that he could have this kind of impact. I just think it basically has taken a year for a lot of reasons, right? I thought this could happen when he was acquired last summer and you hit the ground running in the fall. it never clicked for a number of reasons, including Cat missing 53 games, including Rudy not quite being himself, not comfortable with the fit. After 10 years in Utah, you become a creature of habit, right? And so now you're uprooted, and all of a sudden you're in a new place with new people, new buildings, all that kind of stuff. It just took some time, and the roster wasn't quite right either. But it got right at the trade deadline, and now you're seeing that same sort of group with the additions of Shake Milton and Troy Brown Jr. to a lesser extent, kind of come together like I think the Wolves thought it would last year. And when you have Rudy, he's a great luxury, but you don't want to rely on that luxury. And I think Chris Finch has said this numerous times. Too many times last year, I think the Wolves just thought, hey, we've got Rudy back there. Maybe I don't have to put in 110% on the perimeter because I got the big guy behind me. That's putting too much pressure on Rudy. That's not utilizing his strengths. You've got to still defend at a high level, and that way, then Rudy doesn't have to be relied upon. Now he can kind of float. Now he can excel at the level that he was when he was in Utah. And again, it's something that doesn't show up in the box score, but I put these numbers together the other week. Last week is that the shots he deters at the rim. That's a stat you can't just look at the box score and see. But my favorite thing is when opponents dribble into the paint, they look up, they see Rudy, and they hightail it right out of the paint. They go back to the perimeter. He deters shots like nobody in the league. When he's on the floor, opponents only take 23% of their shots at the rim. When he's off the floor, that number jumps to 29%. Teams smell blood. Hey, Rudy's not in there. We got to attack the rim. Now's the time. And they get shots in the restricted area. That's what you're trying to prevent. It's all about rim shots. It's all about threes. And Rudy does a tremendous job of deterring those high percentage shots at the rim.
It's 9:08, day before Thanksgiving. Nordo in for PA. PA will return for the Friday feast. Buffalo Wild Wings Savage on Friday. Be there early. A Black Friday football feast with PA in charge. And Maxx Fuller producing for me today. Max.
Hey, what's good, Alan? Speaking of defense, I wanted to talk to you about Karl Anthony Towns' defense this year. Everybody knows how good Cat can be offensively, especially over the last couple weeks. He's been shooting like it's a Michael Bay movie. I mean, the guy just can't miss. But his defense this season, obviously it's early on, but I think it's been the best that we've ever seen in his career thus far. What has changed about Cat's defensive game, and what kind of what difference in intensity has he brought to his defense this season?
Yeah, Max, I completely agree. I think his defense has been better than any point in his career, and I just think he's dialed in at that end of the floor. He's bought in. That's a big reason why the Wolves have the number one defensive rating and have for, 16 out of the last 18 days. They've been the top defense in the NBA. They're doing things that just other teams aren't even doing once. Like 6 times this year, they've already held an opponent under 40% shooting and under 30% from three. This is an offensive-based league that has every single year offenses and shooting and talent has grown in this league, and yet the Wolves are going old school and holding teams under 40%. They've done that 6 times combined, hold teams under 40 and under 30 from deep. Nobody else in the league has done it more than twice. 12 teams haven't even done it. That's how good the Wolves' defense has been, and most of those have come on the home floor where they're just suffocating other teams' offenses. I mean, the Knicks got just suffocated the other night in the third quarter. But back to Cat, there were a couple possessions in that Knicks game that really stood out when the game was in the balance in that third quarter. And in years prior, I think you either see an offensive player get around Cat and score or draw a foul and get to the free throw line. But Cat held his own. He's moving his feet really well. He's getting those arms extended upwards, verticality. You're allowed to do that. And he's not only getting stops, but then he's securing rebounds and triggering fast breaks and stuff. He's been a big part of the success that the Timberwolves have had defensively. There's no doubt about it.
When I looked at this team into the season, and kind of a consistent thing is coming out of the break, coming out of halftime, third quarters. If the Wolves have ever been gettable, it has felt like over the last couple of years that third quarters in particular are the spot. I'm now seeing it. How intentional do you think has the focus been in stemming that tide and changing that aspect of how this team operates? Because that's been a consistent thing as well as we look at. We could probably list 15 things that are really good right now for a 10-win team on the top of the heap of the West, but third quarters in particular has been something that stood out to me in the wrong respect in the past. It's looking really damn good right now, Alan.
No, I think it tells you about the character of this team, of how they come out and play in the third quarter. And you're right. It hasn't been good in years past. And you never quite can put your finger on exactly why. But the bottom line is, overall, the team hasn't been ready to play in the second half, and I don't think that's on the coaching staff. I think that's the combination of players just not coming out with the kind of intensity you need to have. But this group is a little bit different. The other night, Chris Finch was at shoot-around earlier in the day. He was just like, one of his points was like, let's get off to a good start tonight. Let's have that defensive focus right from the opening tip, because the Wolves had lost 5 straight opening quarters, and you can't play from behind in this league on a nightly basis and expect to win games at the rate they want to win games. And so this team responds to those kind of things. When he just mentions one little thing, that becomes the focus, and the team just kind of responds. And I think that has been a general theme, maybe not a specific thing to a particular game, but a theme from Chris Finch. Like, hey, let's get these second halves off to a good start. Let's come out of the locker room, pay attention to what we're showing you, make our adjustments, come out, hit the game, hit the ground running, which the Wolves absolutely did against the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks were a really good third quarter team. And yeah, they were wrapping up a 5-game, 8-day road trip, and maybe the Wolves caught them on a bit of a good night. But hey, that happens to all the teams. That'll come around, and that'll be the Wolves in a couple of weeks. Everything balances out in an 82-game season. Just like you're catching Philly on a back-to-back tonight. This is the 5th time in 14 games the Wolves have played an opponent that's been on the second of a back-to-back. But, they don't put asterisks next to those wins or losses in the column. It doesn't matter whether it was on a second of a back-to-back or if you had 5 days of rest before the game. It counts the same. You better take advantage of it because, like I said, later in the season, you'll be the one on playing your 5th on 0 days rest. And so to the third quarter issue, it's just I think this is a more mature group. And when you look at the rotation, you don't see a lot of young guys. There are no rookies. There are no first-year guys. There are no second-year guys. There are no third-year guys. Jaden and Ant are the 2 youngest in the rotation, and those guys have been starters for 2+ years. Those are guys in their 4th year. Everybody else has been in this league longer, and they've got that kind of experience. They've got that veteranness. They know what to do, and that was one of my big takeaways from training camp was the fact that there was just no drama around this team. There were no real issues. Everybody just came to work. You put in your work, and you go home afterwards. And I think that stems a lot to do with your point guard. Mike Conley is just, the way he plays on the floor, but maybe more importantly, the way he carries himself off the floor, the way he's a leader for this team, the way he's a whisperer into people's ears, just being that vet and helping guys make the right play and think about the game. He's been unbelievable. There's no way, I don't even think there are words to describe how good Mike Conley has been for this organization. It's exactly what the Wolves needed.
Yeah, other than getting fast and loose, I think it was against the Spurs and then the Pelicans on that road trip. He basically never turns the ball over. And in some ways, it's that steady Eddie vibe with him. And, it's not that people, polarizing opinions on D'Angelo Russell and all of that. But in the end, in some ways, I can envision a more perfect point guard to run this whole thing. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I think we wish it just, I asked him when we were in Abu Dhabi, I was like, hey, how you feeling heading into your 17th year? He said, I feel like I'm in my 7th. I'm like, that is great news because we need you for another 10 years. We'll sign you up to that deal right now. He had 200 straight minutes without a turnover this year. He turned it over on the very first possession of the season in Toronto and then didn't have another turnover for 200 minutes. And this is from a point guard. And point guards pick up turnovers here and there, an errant pass that maybe it's not the point guard's fault, but guess what? Someone didn't run the right pattern or make the right cut, and it really was on them, but they get tagged with a turnover. 200 minutes is unbelievable for a starting point guard. So he's been unbelievable, and just the Wolves did not need the skill set that D'Angelo Russell brought. They needed the skill set that Mike Conley brings, and that's just about as simple as you can put it.
That's Alan Horton, voice of the Timberwolves, and you're going to get to hear him on the radio tonight. Tip-off shortly after 7 p.m. The Philadelphia 76ers are in town, and you're going to get to hear that right here on the Fan, of course, throughout the season. Just log into that free iHeartRadio app and find the exclusive Wolves channel, and you'll be able to listen to all the games, pre- and post-related content. We're your home for the Howl. A hearts and minds question for you mostly here. How's Ant as a guy that's around the facility? We're all willing Ant, it feels like, into the stratosphere, and he's taking that challenge by storm. There's no doubt about it. A budding superstar that is ascending quickly. But how is he just as a guy that's growing into a leadership role, the go-to guy and a franchise-making player? How's he around Timberwolves land?
Yeah, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know that he's on his path to superstardom. That he's had just improved every single year he's been in the league. That he started for Team USA at the World Cup this past fall. He's one of the guys, and he backs up what he says. You know, he always is talking about his teammates. He's reluctant to talk about himself. He realizes that he needs those guys around him. He needs Carl as much as Carl needs him. You know, you can get into debates about whose team it is or who the leader is. This team doesn't seem to care. They just know that this is the group they've got. They love this group. They all need each other. And Ant is, you know, I think fans have all heard his post-game sound bites and how, you know, his personality just comes through with the way he speaks. And it's, he's just awesome. He's awesome to be around. And he's kind of infectious with that, around the team. He's loose normally, and you know, you wouldn't know he's on this path, I think, to maybe being the face of the league.
With Jaden McDaniels being out the next couple weeks, at least in 2 or 3 weeks, that's I don't want to. It's kind of the first moment of adversity for this team, and Jaden was kind of slow to get into the mix as it was. I believe it was a calf prior to the season beginning that kind of held him up a bit, but in the short term, it looked like the other night maybe the easy answer is just Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like that's just there we go, and we move forward with him. Is it a group effort? How do we get around the lack of Jaden in the upcoming games?
Yeah, it's too bad because we had just come off a game against New Orleans in which he was able to stay out of foul trouble, Jaden, and we saw kind of him expand his offensive game. So many games this year, he's been saddled with 4, 5, 6 fouls and has limited his time, and that's limited what the Wolves kind of envisioned for him being a bigger piece of the offense than we've seen. We saw that a little against New Orleans. But, that's a big loss because he is your top defender. He's got the toughest assignment every single night. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I think was, you know, I don't think the Wolves looked at him as a throw-in the Mike Conley trade. When Mike Conley was acquired, they got Nickeil Alexander-Walker too. But Chris Finch knew him from his time in New Orleans. Chris was an assistant coach there when Nickeil was a rookie, and always kind of thought highly of him. And then it's funny how things turn around, and 4 years later, you know, he's arguably a huge piece of that deal. And his defense last year, remember when Jaden punched the wall and broke his hand, wasn't available in the whole season, it was Nickeil who stepped into that role. It was Nickeil who held Jamal Murray to like 40% shooting. Now, when Jamal got free against other guys, it was a problem, a real problem. But Nickeil is an excellent defender. He's blossomed for Team Canada. He's basically their sixth man coming off the bench. And he's a guy who's got a good head on his shoulders, and boy, he gets after it defensively. His shot's starting to come. He's going to slide in that starting lineup, and he's going to pick up starter-type minutes. So I think it really is going to be, hate to say, hey, one guy, go fill the shoes of this guy, but he is the next man up, and he's going to get the minutes. He's going to get the assignments. Personally, I think he's up for the challenge. I think we saw it from the All-Star break last year, him starting to step into that role coming off the bench, then as a starter, and then his Team Canada stuff. It's just been building for him. He's become a really important piece of this team.
Few more for you here, and I'll let you to get on to enjoy the game day with Philly. And I do have a question on that because it's very intriguing. You mentioned it's an OT loss at Cleveland, and then now Embiid's playing 41 minutes. He's made all the games this year on the back-to-backs, but Embiid and Cat in the mix, it should be fun. With the construction of this team, one thing, when we talk about the Wolves 9 to noon, and PA and I go back and forth, whether it's interviews with Chris Finch or just looking at this team from abroad, I constantly see text messages and emails. If I'm texting with buddies about it, it's all about the fact that they don't take or make a ton of threes. Now, the conversation really lifted off when Rudy Gobert got here in terms of we're kind of going the opposite direction in some ways in terms of how the league is going. We got to have threes from everywhere. We got to shoot 40 of them a night like Dallas or like Boston, for instance, and we got to hit them at a 40% clip. Otherwise, we're stuck. Now, the Wolves right now, they're right middle of the road in shooting percentage. I think they take maybe the 5th or 6th fewest number of threes. They're still finding their way to victory via defense. How do you look at that in terms of, you know, not having the what appears to be a more modern, prototypical approach to the game, but finding your way to W's despite that?
I think the most important thing is, like you said at the end there, finding your ways to a W, and there are a lot of different ways you can get there. To me, it's not so much about how many threes you're taking or what percentage you're shooting. A lot of three-point shooting is just, a lot of people feel analytically wise in the league that it's a lot of there's a lot of randomness to it. Can you defend a three? Yeah, there's some teams that can come out and defend threes, but really it's really about luck on a nightly basis, whether guys are hitting shots or not. That's kind of the level it's at. To me, it's more about three-point differential. So if you're not going to hit a lot of threes or take a lot of threes, well, you can't be outscored by 2 or 3 threes a game. That's 9 points. That's too much of a margin to overcome. And I would say that's the most important thing. And the Wolves are right now right in the middle of the pack in 3-point differential. So on certain nights they're plus and other nights they're minus, but they're right there overall. So I don't think it's so much about focusing on taking those shots, because the Wolves have been there before. I mean, even a couple of years ago under Chris Finch, they took a ton of threes. Under Ryan Saunders, they were top 5 in taking threes. Where'd that get them? That didn't get them very far at all. What you need is that balance. And so it's if you're not going to take a lot, you better defend a lot. And the Wolves are defending the 3-point line. They're not giving up, for whatever the reason. They're not giving up a ton of threes. And so the differential is, it's a negative, but it's less than 1 per game. And so you're talking about a minimal margin. And so, just because you take a lot of threes and it's modern and that's what the game is doing, the Wolves have been there, not had the success with it. They would like to probably take a few more threes, and I think that will kind of develop. The offense, I think, is still very much a work in progress. They are, ranked in that 10 to 15 range right now offensively with the number 1 defense. And so when you've got that number 1 defense, it does allow you a bigger margin for error at the offensive end. And I think the offense will hone in. I really do think this will be a top 10 offense by the time the season is up. And I think this is going to be they might not finish in the top spot in defensive rating, but I think they can be a top 5 defense, something the Wolves have never done in their franchise history. One of 2 teams in the league to never have a top 5 defense. They've only had a top 10 defense once, and once was last year. So they've got that dialed in. I think the offense will come, and I think Cat's going to be a big part of this, because he got off to a slow start shooting threes. Once he gets hot, he's just too good a shooter not to finish at around 40% on 7 or 8 attempts per game. He's going to have a big offensive season, and I think those numbers, they'll balance out a little bit for him after a slow start.
The Wolves take on the 76ers tonight, and at the beginning of the season, it kind of seemed like Philly was going to have a disastrous season with all the James Harden drama. He's going on a world tour to slander Daryl Morey, all this and that, and eventually they obviously traded him to the Clippers, and the 76ers look even better than they did last year, and a lot of that is due to the emergence of Tyrese Maxey, who's becoming a superstar in his own right. Can you talk about Tyrese Maxey's game and how the Wolves will look to approach him defensively?
Yeah, I would say he's probably under the radar as far as NBA fans go. I think they're succeeding not only because of Embiid and Maxey, but also not having James Harden somehow makes you a better team. That's funny how that works. He is just not the kind of impact player he used to be, and Houston found that out. Brooklyn found that out. Philly's going to find it out. Is finding it out, and I think the LA Clippers will regret the decision to trade for James Harden. That just seems like a disaster waiting to happen in LA. But Maxey's good, and he's fast. He's while Embiid leads things kind of inside and he's the focus of the offense, Maxey's kind of the guy on the perimeter that can get up into you. He can score. He can do all these things. Tonight, I think the key, I was just looking this up because anytime you play Joel Embiid, we saw this the other night with the Knicks kind of flopping a little bit early, Jalen Brunson, Mitchell Robinson, going down rather easily. There's not a guy in the league that goes down quicker and who's bigger and stronger than any of these guys is Joel Embiid. This dude hits the deck all the time, and this is a huge matchup tonight. I know they're on the second of a back-to-back, but Embiid is averaging 16 free throw attempts per game over his last 6 games against the Wolves. This is a monster issue tonight. Like, keep him off the free throw line, and the referees can't fall for his antics. He sells more contact. We've seen it through the years in these 6 games. Him just flailing himself to the ground, putting those big arms up into the air and, dropping the ball, saying he got fouled, those type of things. It's going to be a raucous atmosphere. Philly's won 5 in a row at Target Center. We haven't beaten them since 2016. It's time. These are marquee type. When Boston comes in, when New York comes in, when Philly comes in, these are marquee franchises And Boston and Philly, certainly with the success recently to back it up. New York, not so much, but still a marquee team coming in that play physical. They get whistles. And this crowd at Target Center has been awesome over this course of the season so far. 6-0 on the home floor. They got into it the other night early, and I expect them to get into it early tonight. It's the huge key. You can't have the officials bail out Joel Embiid and the 76ers. We got to keep him. I don't know what the number is. I don't know what you try to keep him to free throw wise. I'll set it maybe at 12. You keep him under 12 free throw attempts. I think that's a really good number. Hey, you know what? Let's shoot for the stars. Let's go 10.
Yeah.
10. He gets to double digits, you're in trouble. Let's get on the officials. Let's get on. Let them know right away not to fall for any of his antics. I'm already getting fired up, man. It's only 9:30. We still got about 10 hours to go before tipping this thing.
I expect nothing less. Hey, thank you so much for giving me so much time this morning, and looking forward to hearing you on the station tonight. And let's go. Let's get on those officials early. We're chanting Rudy at Target Center. It's day before Thanksgiving. There's no reason for a packed house not to explode tonight. I love it. Thanks for your time, man.
You got it, Nordo. Anytime.
That's Alan Horton, voice of the Timberwolves, and he kicks off 9 to noon. And again, tip-off shortly after 7 p.m. right here on The Fan. You'll get to hear Alan Horton calling all the action. Follow him at Wolves Radio via Twitter. And that begins the TimberTech set list 9 to noon. Nordo in for PA. At 10 a.m., we're going to have Ben Lieber on the phone as he prepares for his own Turkey Day-related festivities, but we'll chat some Vikings with him. And at 11 o'clock, we'll check in with Michael Russo and just the Minnesota Wild as they are practicing. They're back in Sweden, and the Colorado Avalanche in town on Friday. So they got and they have some work to do. That's where, as the Wolves are off to this hot start and everything going well and handling things beautifully, excited for a massive matchup against Philly, well, the Minnesota Wild are just looking for points in any possible way that they can get them and figure out how to keep the puck out of the freaky net. At 10:30, special guests, some Vikes Bites related bits featuring the guys who sponsor Vikes Bites on a daily basis, 9 to noon, featuring Northern Fire. We'll get into that. That's the TimberTech set list, timbertech.com. And we shall return on a Wednesday before Thanksgiving, 9 to noon, right?
KFAN.
Wild Wednesdays, sponsored by Jim Beam, a crowd pleaser since 1795, are here until January. Listen every Wednesday through December for your chance to win tickets.
So come on and tickety-tack yourself before you wreck yourself. Check. You better check yourself or you wreck yourself, cause I'm bad for your health. I come real stealth, dropping bombs on your moms, kill car alarms. Doing foul crime, I'm that brother with the Alpine 746, so always let tricks know and freaks know we got that. No, I'm not a sucker, sitting in a house of pain, and no, I'm not the butler.
Welcome back, 9 to noon. It is a Wild Wednesday, brought to you by the aforementioned Jim Beam. And that was kind of our bit yesterday, is Takesgiving. Things that you can spread around the Thanksgiving table, big opinions, hot takes. We had some Dobbs bits yesterday. And I was thinking, with the Minnesota Wild at 5-8-4, and they just went on a little study abroad trip, grabbed a couple of points in Sweden, come home, Avs on Friday. I was kind of thinking, in the honor of Takesgiving, can somebody give me a take on the Minnesota Wild? Near the bottom of the Central, just can't keep the puck out of their net to save their lives. Is it Gus melting down? Are we really going to blame it on just missing Spurgeon and Matt Boldy and others earlier this season? My take on the Wild at this particular juncture is that I don't necessarily have a take. And that's super boring. I get it. And I apologize for the boring part of it. But taking a stand with this team where, and when we talked to Russo at 11, kind of a unique angle that was in his piece in terms of, do some of the recent extensions, does that breed complacency or contentment? However you want to look at it. But not getting enough out of some of those guys. The goaltending hasn't been as good as it was and needs to be. Defensively has been, at times, a complete disaster, while simultaneously you're trying to lift up or prop up a guy like Brock Faber, who is kind of picking up where he left off last season. So there are some positive elements in the mix. And I forget what the percentage was, but kind of the idea historically in the National Hockey League where if you're not in a playoff spot, I don't know if it's after Thanksgiving, but it's sometime over the next month, let's just say between now and the end of December, you're typically not going to be a playoff team. And so under the leadership and the reins of one Bill Guerin, he's tried as hard as he could, I think, and then in other ways maybe not as hard as he could, to keep the financial conversation out of it because there's nothing you can do about it. It's the money is spent for another couple of years in terms of buyouts, and at some point the sky's going to open up, and not the way that Max is familiar with things making it rain, but in a different kind of way with the cap opening up. Maybe it'll look like that. Similar visual.
Yeah,
I can't
down the road.
I can't rule that out.
Right. We'll just see Billy G with a handful of ones.
And apparently he's going to have about 15 million of those $1 bills. So he's going to have to maybe change up on the currency a bit, but
John Morant
or denomination. But that is the obvious. That is the anchor that's being hung around the neck from a financial standpoint of these guys right now. But in the end, the goal is to make the playoffs. They're not playing playoff hockey right now. And into the season, kind of celebrating how close this team is, how close-knit, and the bonds, and how much, similarly to a conversation that you could have about the Minnesota Vikings. Culturally, the locker room, it's so tight, they believe. And that's what keeps them in these games. Despite when turnovers take the game out of their hands. But how quickly that tightness and those bonds can be challenged and maybe even broken when the losing persists. So the Wild are in an absolutely hideous spot right now. And how the hell do they get out of it? And that's the key there. So on Takesgiving, I'm thinking to myself, is it really just as simple as keep the freaking puck out of the net? I believe they allow the second most goals per game in the National Hockey League right now. And offensively, everything's disjointed. So finding those mix and matchups from a line perspective, this is where Evason has to do some of his most frustrating and his dirtiest work, is finding a way to fix this thing. Otherwise, you come to acceptance, where I just got this text, and text available all day, by the way. Takes and talkers, talkbacks, we're here for them. 64686, the KFAN Bradshaw and Bryant text line. I got this text. The Wild are just a poor hockey team. So did you just come to acceptance of that? They are plagued by the same thing as in past seasons. They struggle to score goals, and the defense has been non-existent. So if you can come to acceptance of that, well then, are you trading assets and freeing things up come trade deadline? Well, when we talked to Russo at 11, an interesting angle that he came up with along with Joe Smith in theathletic.com is, do the recent extensions actually handcuff Bill Guerin and his ability to get return assets and equity for some of these guys nearing the end of their contracts, or they would have been, but now multi-year deals for the Foligno types or Hartman, et cetera, some of these guys. So difficult spot for the Minnesota Wild, no doubt. And, you think about Kaprizov and the start that he is, he's kind of and he should be the patriarch of this team. You look at him first when you're thinking about where the goals are coming from, and you need better from your superstar. So it is ugly in St. Paul right now. A chance to change that, but it's getting late pretty soon. We'll talk about all of that in more detail with Russo, but it's a quick segment, so we'll pause and we'll come back. We'll get News to Nord Max style And we'll do that when we return. And then second hour kicks off with Ben Lieber. We'll jump into Vikings heavy conversation and some barbecue a day before Turkey Day. Loving that. It's Nordo in for PA. You're listening
on the Fan.
Yet our best trained, best educated, best equipped, best prepared troops refuse to fight. Matter of fact, it's safe to say that they would rather switch than fight.
Want to chime in on what's happening with your favorite KFAN program? Make your voice heard on the Bradshaw and Bryant text line. Let us know what you have to say by texting your message to 64686. That's 64686. Standard message and data rate supply.
Yeah, several good text messages in on the Minnesota Wild. We'll get to those at some point throughout the show. Vikings opinions in play as well. But first, been waiting for this all morning. It's News du Nord, and it's brought to you by The Casino at Canterbury Park, CanterburyPark.com. Live racing will kick off again in the spring, so we got to wait a bit for that, but you don't have to wait for bingo. Tuesdays at Canterbury Park, poker, blackjack, table games, having some sips and chips. That's an all-year-round type of thing at Canterbury. So get to CanterburyPark.com for all their cool events. Where are we headed to first, Max?
Let's start with tomorrow's football slate. There will be plenty of food and football to go around on Turkey Day tomorrow. Hopefully, you don't feel like your rivals with your family, but there will be plenty of rivalry games on the NFL slate. For the first time in a long time, I think a lot of us won't mind seeing the Lions in action on Thanksgiving as they take on the Packers in Detroit in the early game. We follow that up with an NFC East clash as the Cowboys face off against the Commanders in Washington. And finally, to cap off the night, Brock Purdy and the Niners head to Seattle to take on Geno and the Seahawks.
Yeah, it's so the games from a competitive standpoint appear awful. I grew up in the beautiful Heartland City, right in the nestling in the river valley of southern Minnesota, Mankato, Minnesota. And I'm about the only Vikings fan in my family. My father will be at my place tomorrow. And he's a diehard Packers fan. My grandfather is an owner. So that's kind of that's what I've had to deal with my entire life.
How did you become a Vikings fan?
It's a long story. Divorce and my neighbor, Jean Cooper, in my apartment building, the woman that lived below me, Jean Cooper, rest in peace. She was as diehard a Vikings fan as there ever would be. And she would take me to training camp starting when I was around 6. Up at Blakesley on the beautiful campus of Mankato State. I'm always going to call it Mankato State, by the way, even though it's Minnesota State University, Mankato. Always going to call it Mankato State, so please save your vitriol. I would go to training camp, and it was like, whoa, Chris Dolman's right on the other side of that fence. Randall McDaniel, Johnny Randall, Chris Carter. And I put my little arm through the fence back in the day where you could get closer than 50 yards from the players, slapping hands with those guys, and that's how I became a Vikings fan. But we're rooting for the Pack tomorrow. We are. And the pain associated with that, it's a moral good. So just, if there's any guilt, however you handle guilt, you can deal with that, of course, on your own accord. But we're rooting for the Packers tomorrow. It'll be, but to your point, Max, the Lions are fun to watch. The Lions are a badass team. And no signs of slowing down, and they're probably going to mow down Jordan Love and that just absolutely less than mediocre green and gold bunch. Cowboys should handle business tomorrow. They kind of got this road and home split thing going, but they dominate, and they're a freight train right now. This Deron Bland and his 4 pick sixes on the cusp of NFL history as he's tied a record with that. But then in the late game, Seattle's in trouble, and just looking at their schedule, Seattle's in the midst of what appears to be a 5-game losing streak. And they have, I think, in their next 4 games, and it didn't come up yesterday, but you lose a tough one to the Rams. Geno Smith has some sort of elbow/triceps-related issue going on in his throwing arm, so that's a problem. But their next 4 games, they have 2 against the Niners, and then the Cowboys and Eagles. So they're in an absolute, just a gauntlet of a stretch here schedule-wise. They are in the midst of what shall be a 5-game losing streak. I think they're 6-4 right now. That'll put them at 6-8. Let me see if I have that correct in front of me here. Yeah, Seahawks 6-4. They'll be 6-8 after these next 4 games, including a brutal loss that they'll take at the hands of the Niners tomorrow. And they're in trouble. So that is, as a Vikings fan, something to pay attention to when you think about wild card positioning. It seems very unlikely you're going to catch the Lions in the division at this point, at least for the moment. You still got 2 against them to decide for yourself, but at this point, if you're looking for wild card position, you're looking for the Seahawks to lose every possible game, and they're going to get brutalized. And then Black Friday, for those of you that you get the shopping done in the morning, and then have a lunch, and maybe you're putting up the Christmas tree. I know that's what we're doing in my house. You'll be able to watch the Dolphins and the offensively not gifted, not inclined, the New York Football Jets on Amazon. So that's kind of cool.
Former 3-time Pro Bowl linebacker Darius Leonard, also known as Shaquille Leonard, as he wants to be called recently, he was waived by the Indianapolis Colts in a move that shocked many around the league yesterday. Injuries have hampered Leonard in recent years, and his lack of typical production this season had seen his minutes reduced. But still, I don't think many expected such a cornerstone for Indy's defense for years to be waived in the middle of the season. Leonard will now go through the waiver process and can be claimed by any team in the league. However, if a team does claim him, they'd owe him roughly $6 million in base salary for the rest of the season. And he's also under contract until 2026. So lots of NFL insiders are saying it's more than likely that he clears those waivers and becomes a free agent. But I'd imagine he'd be highly sought after by many playoff contenders around the league.
Yeah, I think he would as well. And I guess I was kind of shocked by it because he's played, I believe, in all the games. He played in the London game, and I'm scratching my head here where they must have been in a bye. Let's see here. I think they were in a bye this most recent weekend. But
I think you're right.
I'm shocked by that news for a team, by the way, in the Colts. The AFC is not exactly decided when Kenny Pickett and the Steelers are currently a playoff team. The Colts, even in their current state, and they've had to adjust with Minshew taking over for Anthony Richardson. Promising start by him, though. He looks like he's going to be really good if he can stay healthy. He runs all over the freaking field, but I believe he had at least one concussion and then this shoulder injury that took him out. So learning how to avoid getting knocked out of games, certainly an A topic for him, but I'm surprised that he did what he did. And I saw something on social media last night. He was just chilling, handing out turkeys, right, like doing charity. Good for him. If the decision, mutual or otherwise, but if you're a team, look at what the Niners are doing, just stacking. I'm sure they'd trade out Randy Gregory for Leonard in a freaking second, but them stacking defenders, them stacking guys that can get to the quarterback, guys that can make plays. And Leonard, at only 28 years old, is one of those guys. So he'll be getting a lot of phone calls. There's no doubt about that. Cam Newton says he hasn't gotten a phone call from a team in 2 years. It probably took about 2 minutes for people to start calling Darius Leonard.
And last one for me, the Lakers and Pacers both punched tickets to the inaugural midseason tournament knockout round with wins last night. More pertinent to local interests is LA, who rocked and rolled the Jazz 131-99 to remain undefeated in the Western Conference tournament bracket. The only 2 other undefeated teams in the West are the Wolves and the Kings, who will face off against one another in a midseason tournament game on Friday night at the Target Center. With the win, LA is guaranteed one of the top 2 spots in the West and will host a knockout round game. So depending on how Friday night goes, the Wolves could be heading to LA for a mid-season tournament knockout round game.
Still trying to figure out the vibe with the in-season tournament, but I'm really rooting for this to happen. And with the way this team is playing, it looks more likely than ever. I believe the knockout tournament or the in-season tournament title game is the Saturday of the Vegas Raiders game.
I believe that's correct.
And so the ability to find my way into that game to watch the Wolves on Saturday night and then be able to see the Vikings on Sunday. That's very selfish of me. Of course, I want the team to win every game as it is, but I'm just selfishly, I'm going to be there. It would be awesome to see that. That's super cool. So Lakers, The Lakers still working their. I mean, what LeBron is doing right now is, again, ageless, historic, amazing, unbelievable, whatever adjective you want to use for those guys. But what our team is doing right now is kind of forcing me to not focus on other teams in the West. I'm watching what my team is doing. And at 10-3, as we talked about with Alan Horton to open the show, things are pretty damn good. Looking forward to Embiid at Target Center tonight. That is News to Nord, brought to you by The Casino at Canterbury Park. Maybe other news nuggets throughout the show, and since this was a truncated segment. But when we return, Ben Lieber joins via the hotline, and we'll chat about the Minnesota Vikings, who are on the chill as they begin their practice week in advance of a Monday night game right after the weekend, hosting the Chicago Bears. It's Nordo in for PA, second hour ahead right here on The Fan.